Hello and welcome to Ad Age Studio 30 Live. I'm John Dioso, the editor of Ad Age Studio 30. Media measurement, not to mention the entire media industry itself, is in the midst of continual upheaval. Fragmentation is the status quo at precisely the moment when the lack of a measurement standard is roiling the industry and leading to the rise of currency alternatives. Add to that the perfect storm of deprecation of third-party cookies in response to new privacy regulations, and the ability of marketers to analyze campaign reach and effectiveness is that much more complicated. So I'm lucky to be joined today by two experts on the state of media measurement in the age of fragmentation and whether today's solutions are up to the task. I'm pleased to welcome Daniel Jondro-Negoro, the co-founder of BeatGrid, and Matt O'Grady, who's the managing director and president of dunnhumby. Daniel and Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
So good to have the both of you here today. So actually, first, before we get into it, Daniel, for our North American audience who may be hearing about BeatGrid for the first time, can you just give us a quick introduction, particularly in light of cross-channel media measurement in this era of continual fragmentation?
Yeah, sure. BeatGrid is an ad measurement solution for advertisers that really want to truly bring all video together into one holistic method of measuring all these different channels. And there have been a lot of talk and innovation, but what advertisers really want, and I want to be prepared for the future as well, is have a solution that can make it a single source panel-based solution where you have true demographics behind a measurement solution to measure across TV, CTV, YouTube, social, and out of home. And that's what BeatGrid does. So that's available. We have America's largest single source cross media panel, persons level panel. And yeah, I can obviously, as you go through your questions, speak more to that as we get along.
Well, great. Single source, I think, is a key word I want to come back to in a little bit. But first, I want to get to Matt. You know, Matt, we just finished another upfront season, and it's a great time to just assess the state of the TV industry. And given your background as the former CEO of Nielsen Catalina and former global managing director of Nielsen, what is the state of media measurement now? You know, what are the challenges facing advertisers, and what will it take to get to the right solutions to future-proof brands?
You know, I'll start with your last question. What is the greatest challenge facing advertisers today? And that is effective attribution and incrementality and understanding, you know, what really drove sales. Now, for a long time, agencies and advertisers were confident with their buys, which were based on reach and frequency alone. And unfortunately, that's just not working. But in the upfront season, we didn't see any notices or PR statements or press releases stating that anybody had really moved away from buying the majority of their budget on TV, on reach and frequency. Now, granted, TV has become both digital TV and linear TV. They may not like it, but they're opting for the easiest route. You know, the life at an agency is very tough. But there are innovations, but nothing supplanting, the big unnamed company on this side of the pond. However, because of digital TV and because of all the size of the panels that are larger, as Daniel had mentioned, he has the largest single source panel, which I find, painfully ironic that more people in the United States don't know about it. But I am an advisor on the advisory board to BeatGrid, in addition to being the managing director for dunnhumby. But I have a passion for this industry, and I want to see it continue to change. Because what the innovation that the advertisers want is risky, and they're going to have to take a risk to get there.
Daniel, can you weigh in on those questions as well? I mean, again, and you can also talk a little bit more about what inroads you've made into the States as far as talking to various sources and anybody else in the industry talking about this, as Matt called it, the largest single source panel available. But give us a little bit more perspective as where you see the industry right now and where we need to get to.
Yeah, sure. So I think we're in a perfect storm, as you mentioned as well in your intro, right? So you have the proliferation of screens, and we've been talking about that for the last couple of years. And I'll mention something a bit more about that in a second. At the same time, we have an increasing demand from both consumers and advertisers to have a more privacy safe and privacy future-proof solution in terms of sharing their data from a consumer perspective, but also from an advertiser standpoint. Advertisers are really careful touching any solution that isn't privacy future-proof, and maybe a bit more for tech companies or companies that deal with data in their own businesses, but they're extremely cautious. And the third part of that is the demise of the cookie, right? Which is obviously something that we've talked more than enough about, but it all comes together. The biggest part is the fragmentation. Well, the fragmentation today is creating headaches for agencies and advertisers to really understand how to be the most effective in the buy. And if you think about that and where it's likely going to be in 3 years from now, it's only going to get worse, right? And what we've seen, and BeatGrid is a solution that is, and it's important to mention, is not only available in the US, but also in the UK, Australia, and Germany, where similar things are happening, but from a slightly different perspective. And what we've learned is that what we see is that advertisers are really looking for a simple method, a consistent method to truly understand, am I buying more reach or am I buying more frequency? And can I do that without having to, put the pieces together from, let's say, a YouTube-based solution, YouTube-only based solution, or a Meta-only solution, or TV-only solution, right? So that single source component, and it was mentioned a few times, is going to be key moving forward as the landscape is only going to get more complex.
Got it. Well, since you brought up, since you did bring up being a multinational company and working across the world in different places, I'd really love you, and maybe Matt can also weigh on this too, coming with, with a North American perspective with his vast experience at Nielsen. What are some of those differences that you've seen around the world, and what lessons can the American media industry take away from that? Obviously you mentioned privacy before, so the privacy regulations, we really modeled a lot of what was happening here in the States over on GDPR. So that's something you've been dealing with for many years now, or a few years now. And it's, gone through various iterations as it's kind of reacted, as the industry has reacted to it, and consumer behavior has also reacted to as well. So can you give us what type of insights that you're bringing to the North American audience? And then Matt, can you weigh in as well?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen, so we have a solution in Australia. In Australia, we're a pretty well-known nowadays kind of the default solution for any CTV measurement. And it's typically also a market where, advertisers and ad tech companies test out new solutions. And what they've seen is that the challenge with model data is that it allows them to measure campaigns big and small. But the challenge is that they've seen that it also gives them flaky results, fuzzy data, and that the output and the insights that they use to optimize their buys are not that reliable. So we've seen kind of, because it's smaller, in these smaller markets, such as Australia or the UK, they're sometimes moving a bit faster. They're testing out new solutions. They see, hey, these are modeled approaches. Yes, they may be easy to work with, easy to implement, but they're not really giving the results reliably across platforms or across all types of campaigns. And this is where they moved quickly back into solutions such as BeatGrids, where they are more looking at measuring demographics rather than relying on measuring devices. And that's shift number one. That they're going about that quite quickly. Whereas what we see in the US, we talk a lot about big data, right? And everything needs to be based on modeling. And I think it's a very dangerous territory. Given what I said before, the market is only going to shift further into a more fragmented landscape. So how are we, if we're already on the edge right now, what's it going to look like in a few years from now, where that's only going to get worse, where the modeling is just, we're measuring screens, we're measuring devices, but we're not even sure who's behind that device.
Right. The keyword, one of the other keywords that we've been hearing in the past few years is personalization. And obviously data plays a big part in that. Actually, Matt, before you weigh in, I just want to remind everybody, if you're just tuning in, that this is Ad Age Studio 30 Live. I'm John Dioso from Ad Age, and I'm joined by Daniel Jandro Nagoro, the co-founder of BeatGrid, and Matt O'Grady, who's the managing director and president of dunnhumby. And we're talking about media measurement and whether today's solutions are up to the task. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and please let us know where you're joining us from. We'll give you a shout out. So Matt, I'd love to get your perspective on everything that Daniel just said. And, again, data, talk about where the industry is. I mean, what was the word that Daniel used? Fuzzy data. I'm sure that we can't, in the States, we can't identify with that at all, especially as it regards TV measurement these days. So please.
Right. Yeah, the comparison between, and I've worked both in the United States in measurement and attribution and outside of the United States with measurement and attribution. So outside of the United States, you do have joint industry committees that are in charge of the measurement. So a country will come together and say, we agree on this methodology. So I agree with Daniel that I think you'll see innovation in smaller markets maybe move quicker than in very large and lucrative markets like the US. The drawback, though, both in the US and outside of the US, as Daniel was referring to, is this dependency on modeled panels, probabilistic model panels that are too small. Now, you just need something, first of all, much bigger. I thought the measurement industry would have been further along by now. In prepping for this call, I thought to myself, I thought back 3 years, and then I thought, where will we be in 3 years? We will be more highly fragmented in 3 years, but we have not. 3 years ago, we said in the United States, we were going to use return bat data and set-top box data in conjunction with panel data. And no vendor has been able to do that. And set-top box data is only applicable for linear at this point. So how are they going to actually penetrate, the digital streaming that happens in walled gardens? So you do need a deterministic, person-spaced large panel like BeatGrid is currently offering in the market today. I'm disappointed, but I'm also an optimistic person and hopeful that we will be able to see something, that's truly, like Daniel also said it, and you said it also in the beginning, it has to be easy to implement. It has to be cross-platform or cross-channel, and there's whole different definition of platform or cross-channel today, or multiple definitions. It has to be person-spaced, and it's got to be single source, and that requires, as I said earlier, a risk. A lot of these, big buyers and sellers are not willing to take a risk, and they're actually willing to buy waste because they know they'll get some of their audience. Maybe they're breaking a trend line with accounting or finance. Maybe they don't have time, to really evaluate the risk. But if they don't do it, it's going to become something else, and then Daniel will be focusing, his video, person's measurement on other channels or on retail media. So the risk, these waves are coming at us. The perfect storm is much more than cookie deprecation and privacy. The fragmentation and the proliferation of different media outlets, is continues to be number one. Take a risk. Try something new.
What you said before about people are willing to accept waste that just really fly. I mean, there are a bunch of CFOs out there who are probably tearing their hair out because the economic climate in the States and, in business industry is just no waste whatsoever. It's all about ROAS. It's all about ROI. So,
Right. But if a CFO really looked at it and they saw the buy and they understood how much waste they were buying, maybe they'd say, hey, this CPM isn't really that great because I'm only getting, we're back to Wanamaker, who said, I know that half of my advertising's wasted. I just don't know which half. If you have a large person-based panel that can break through a walled garden or any other digital streaming method, then you should pay the appropriate amount based upon a verified audience that you actually reached.
right. Okay. Now, we've talked a bunch about the challenges that the industry is facing now and where we are now. So now that we've set the stage, I'd really like to talk a little bit more about the how, right? So I'd like you both to weigh in on the new approaches or strategies that the industry should pursue in order to sift through all the data challenges that we're facing as it relates to different channels, especially CTV or streaming, where major audience behavioral shifts are driving all the change. Dan, you want to take that first?
Yeah, so I think, as Matt in his previous comment was mentioning where, the suggestion for agencies and advertisers to take more risk. Also, what we see, the realization is that the realization is there, right, for buyers, but it's not always easy to get the buying and the measurement aligned. And what I mean by that is that you buy channels in silos, right? And there is a default solution. And again, it's related to risk. There's a default solution for TV. There's a default solution for, let's say YouTube, and whether it's, coming from Google themselves, or it's the same with the social platforms. That means that the thinking of the buyer is not really designed to think cross-channel necessarily. Yes, there are cross-channel verification models, right? But again, heavily based on model data. But most planners are not really working with reach curves that are giving them a deduplicated reach curves across CTV, across linear, and across other video platforms. And it means that their behavior and how they are looking at measurement solutions and how they're adopting measurement solutions is not always aligned with how they're looking to plan and buy. And so that's, to Matt's point earlier, it's a tough job for those agencies. It's really difficult. And this is where we need to help them, and we need to make their lives easier. But it's also, at the same time, there need to be a more open-mindedness to take risks in adopting these kinds of new solutions.
Matt, weigh in on you mentioned risk before, so I'd like you to pick that up as well.
Sure. But first, in regard to what Daniel just said, you have to check the standard boxes about reach curves and understand, the standard metrics that we're all used to. I'm not saying abandon that by any means, but attribution is tougher, and it requires, the ability to understand if it really created a sale. So you're going to see a lot more of matching, sales data to panels, and that's why you need a super large, panel to match to sales data, whether it be, loyalty card data, which happens very often in retail media, and that will then tell you if X person actually, purchased it. So if we have the granularity with digital video, and we have all the data that goes along with that IP address or the registration for me at HBO Max, as they call it now, or Apple TV, et cetera, well, somebody I know is matching my loyalty card data somewhere else as well. So that's the how. That's the beginning of the question. But the risk, the industry, and there's so many bodies in the industries that are looking at this, and they're actually cross-collaborating. So I do acknowledge the work that like the ANA and the 4As in the US did. And 4 or 5 years ago, the WFA had a very large, cross-platform initiative, which I don't think was, I don't really know what happened to it. But all of those industry associations, the WFA, the ANA, the 4As, et cetera, the IAB, the MRC, they all need to acknowledge, that there is a major issue here, and them working together to collaborate is a lot better than making a name for themselves, because the definition of channel is not just social. It's like, I'm buying social. Well, within social, you could have 5 or 6 different channels. You need to know exactly which platform within social actually performed for you. You're not going to get that off of a small model data set. You're just going to get, oh, social worked well. Or the other thing that you need to get away from, or you need to take a risk on, if somebody makes it really easy to buy for you and they're sending you the same metrics over and over again, or the same ROAS, you might want to question it. You might want to say, hey, this ROAS has repeatedly been X number. A modeled ROAS number is a very scary thing. And besides that, it's incrementality. Daniel mentioned that earlier. Incremental ROAS is what people need in the attribution space. And moving reach and frequency is just a baseline measure that I'm not saying we get rid of. You'll always need it, but it's a much more sophisticated arena. I mean, we were able to create a COVID vaccine in 11 months. I'm sure we can solve this problem. But and I think it's going to happen more from the private sector, with innovative companies like BeatGrid, and there's plenty of other innovative companies that are, eating away at the incumbents, in the US. But we can do this. This is just math and money. And
yeah, can I just weigh in a little bit more on that? So I think we spoke a lot about reach metrics, incrementality, and measurement in general. And I had a session a week ago about whether effectiveness metrics are going to be a metric treated as a currency in the upfronts next year. And I truly believe that if we can get a consensus on some uniformity on effectiveness measurement, the real opportunity is there as a secondary currency, right? Where, let's say, the normal reach currencies are at a tie, this could be the difference, or as a secondary verification. And this is kind of at the heart at what we do at BeatGrid. We truly believe in incrementality, right? And this is actually, beyond just incremental reach and frequency. A key core of a proposition is a way more advanced way to measure brand lift in a cross-platform and a cross-media environment, because we deterministically measure whether someone is exposed, whether YouTube, whether TikTok, or whether CTV, or whether linear. As soon as they get exposed, we send them a brand lift survey. Okay, we can measure that brand lift with accuracy that wasn't possible before. And it's actually one of the reasons why, we work with clients such as, Unilever and Google, that we have a very close relationship with, also in the US, but also across regions. And they have, sometimes I say, kind of discovered the solution a couple of years ago already. So they are ahead of the curve versus their competitors. And the reason they're looking for a solution like ours is they truly want to understand incrementality, right? And incrementality at a channel level, but also incrementality at just, if there wasn't any campaign, would we have gotten lift anyway, right? And what is the way what is a good metric to say, I don't actually need this campaign, right? There needs to be a good story, to Matt's point, from the CMO to the CFO. And if there isn't any underlying accuracy in the methodology, right? And well, you can imagine that, Google, a brand like, or a company like Google, are champions at methodology. And so incrementality, effectiveness incrementality, the opportunity is there for buyers. And we have a CTV measurement solution, single source, same method with TV. It can all be an apples with apples comparison between TV, CTV, and YouTube. And it's there. It's there for grabs. It's available to the market. But, again, it comes back to the mindset, right? Well, first of all, people need to know it's there, right? And that's why it's good that we're having this conversation. And then there needs to be a mindset of, let's grab the opportunity. Let's grab the data. Let's use it to the fullest.
When Matt mentioned just math and money before, it kind of made me chuckle a little bit because, like you said, I remember in the pre-pandemic times when these conversations started to happen, we need to come up with whether it's a JIC or whatever you want to call it, we need an industry consortium to kind of really come together and figure it out. And we have, like you said, it hasn't happened yet. Okay, I'm done doomsaying. Go ahead, Matt.
We came close in the U.S. I thought there was going to be a media operating committee, but they didn't pull it off. But they're going to be forced to do something. And look, the good news, like in conclusion, or the hopeful news, is that the digital has given us so much data. So that's why you need a large panel, and you need the digital streaming data. And what we see in retail media, we see a lot of this at dunnhumby. You need either surveys or loyalty card data or some kind of sales data. So that's going to force the change anyway. It's going to happen to us. And it was just serendipitous that BeatGrid they found me sort of like Google found them. And I was like, where have you guys been hiding? Would you really have this? So it took Daniel, I think, a couple calls for me to convince me, measurement expert, really proud of my experience, to believe what he had. So I believe that the data itself is there. It's about putting the pieces together. And you're right, we came close before the pandemic. That derailed us. But I think people are going to see it from the private industry sector. I'm really proud of the work that BeatGrid and other innovators are doing in the industry. But all that data and this new definition of channel within channel, or new definitions of cross-platform, will only make it, more interesting and more challenging.
Daniel, we have about a minute left. Give us your closing thoughts. Where do you think we are headed? I mean, we've been talking, Matt brought it up before in a previous conversation. We talked about, we're going to be more fragmented than ever in 3 years or so. Give us your prediction for where we're going to be in 3 years.
Yeah, I think where we're going to be in 3 years is that the buy is going to be more complex, and not because the industry wants it, but because the audience is moving into being everywhere. And it means that instead of buying bigger campaigns, and where the upfront is still a big part, let's say particularly in the linear TV world, and now also obviously with the new fronts in the new TV world, I think we're going to see a bigger scattered market, right? There's going to be happening more there throughout the year, and campaign pieces are going to get smaller, and campaign pieces are going to get more innovative, such as sponsoring CTV live sport events, and those kinds of more creative ways, because there's such fragmentation, that means that the audiences are going to be sucked into their niche interest programs, right? So that means you get certain audience only through those types of programs, and not anymore like we did with the big linear reach. And And the measurement needs to be ready for that. And that's our focus. That's our mission, to be, to stay a very future-proof solution that buyers can rely on.
Matt?
Sure. 3 years from now, I'm not great at predictions, so I won't tell you where we're going to be in 3 years, but I'll tell you what I want and what I want to see happen. I would really love for both the buyers and sellers, the agencies, advertisers, and the platforms or the networks to look at their ad operations and to look at the way they transact business today, so they can incorporate new metrics like what BeatGrid Media is offering. There's been a lot of grandstanding, a lot of criticism of the existing currency. I don't think that's terribly productive. I think what would be much more productive is to say, okay, advertiser A has asked for something different. How do I implement that? How do I buy on that? Because these options are there. BeatGrid is one of many innovators that are out there now. So we really have to, the way that traditional TV and even digital's been bought for 20 years now, it's almost like it's cast in cement. Like, let's break down those barriers, look in your own house and look at your own operations so that you can incorporate new metrics as they become available. That's what I want to see happen, not in 3 years, by the next upfront.
All right. Well, that's a challenge to the industry. So thank you so much. That's all the time we have today. Again, I want to thank Daniel Jandro-Nagoro and Matt O'Grady for joining me today. And thank you for joining us. For Ad Age Studio 30, I'm John Dioso. See you next time.